3 years after the war ended, the galaxy looked nothing like it had before humanity emerged onto the galactic stage. The Crythian Concordat, which had dominated space for a millennium, was gone. In its place was something new, something unprecedented in galactic history. They called it the Confederation of Free Worlds. Secretary-General Okonkwo stood before the inaugural assembly on the neutral station humans had built at a strategic point between former Concordat territories. Representatives from 63 species filled the chamber, some humanoid, some not, all gathered voluntarily. This confederation has no supreme leader, Okonkwo told them. No tribute system, no forced conscription. Each member world maintains complete sovereignty over its own affairs. What we share is mutual defense, free trade, and the promise that no species will stand alone against aggression. The Tyranny representative raised a tentacle in question. What if there's a dispute between member worlds? Then we negotiate, Okonkwo replied. We mediate. We compromise. And if all else fails, we agree to disagree and move on. No one gets invaded for having different ideas. That sounds chaotic, observed a Vexler diplomat. Admiral Park, now serving as the Confederation's military coordinator, smiled. Chaos can be productive. Humans know that better than anyone. We argued with each other for thousands of years, and look what we accomplished. The Assembly approved the Charter with overwhelming support. Not because it was perfect, but because it was better than what came before. Species that had been slaves for centuries were now free to chart their own destiny. The former oppressors, the Crythians, were also given a voice, though a diminished one. The Crythian situation remained complicated. Of their original 12 colony worlds, only 3 survived the post-war chaos. The species that had once numbered billions was reduced to roughly 400 million. They were bitter, defeated, and struggling to find a new identity. The war crimes tribunals had been difficult for everyone. High Arbiter Zelkoth stood trial for the Mars massacre and other atrocities. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy. Humans served as prosecutors, but the judges came from multiple species, including 2 Crythians to ensure fairness. Zelkoth was found guilty. The sentence was life imprisonment, to be served on a human-run facility where he would be treated humanely, but would never again walk free. 300 other Crythian officers received various sentences. Some were executed for particularly heinous crimes. Others received prison terms. Many more were given supervised roles in rebuilding their own society. The trials established an important precedent. Actions had consequences, but justice could be achieved without genocide. Ambassador James Rodriguez visited one of the surviving Crythian colonies 18 months after the war. The planet was called Krythnar, and it held about 80 million Crythians, mostly civilians who had never served in the military. They lived under human protection, which many Crythians found humiliating. Rodriguez met with the colony administrator, a Crythian named Silrath, who had opposed the war from the beginning. They sat in a garden that Crythians had cultivated from native plants, trying to make this refugee world feel like home. Your people hate us, Silrath said quietly. I see it in their eyes when human ships patrol our space. Rodriguez considered that. Some do. 3 million people died on Mars and millions more in the war. That's not something humans forget easily. He paused. But hatred isn't our only emotion. We also believe in redemption. Second chances. The possibility that people can change. Or can we? Silrath asked. Change, I mean. We built an empire on the belief that might makes right. That's what we taught our children for 1,000 years. Then teach them something different now, Rodriguez suggested. Humans spent thousands of years conquering each other. We fought over everything, but eventually, we learned that cooperation achieves more than domination. It took us a long time and we still struggle with it, but we learned. Silrath looked at the human ambassador with something like hope. And you think we can too? I know you can, Rodriguez said. Because you're still here. Your species survived. That means you have a future, and futures can be whatever you make them. Not all interactions were so philosophical. The practical work of building a new galactic order was messy and complicated. Trade disputes arose constantly. Some species tried to settle old grudges now that the Concordat wasn't enforcing order. Pirates and raiders emerged in poorly defended territories. Humanity found itself playing peacekeeper far more often than they'd anticipated. Human fleets responded to distress calls across dozens of systems. Human mediators negotiated disputes. Human engineers helped rebuild infrastructure destroyed in the rebellions. Admiral Park complained about it regularly. "We're not the galaxy's police force," she told Okonkwo during one of their strategy meetings. "We don't have the resources or the authority." "Then what are we?" Okonkwo asked. Park thought about it. "Volunteers, I guess. We keep showing up because no one else will, and we can't stand watching innocent people suffer." "That's very human of us," Okonkwo said with a slight smile. "It's exhausting is what it is," Park replied, but she kept showing up anyway. 5 years after the war, the Confederation held its first general election for coordinating positions. Okonkwo chose not to run, saying humanity shouldn't dominate the new government. A Tirani scholar named Velrus won the position of Confederation Speaker. Her first major decision was to establish a joint military force drawn from all member species. "We learned from humanity that prepared defenses prevent war better than empty threats," she explained. "But we also learned that no single species should have too much military power." The joint fleet was small but professional. Humans provided much of the training and technology, but command positions were distributed among all willing species. Even the Crithians, after much debate, were allowed to contribute a small number of ships. Admiral Park supervised the integration. She watched a human captain working alongside a Tirani navigator and a Vexlor weapons officer, all on a ship designed by Plethani engineers. It was chaotic and inefficient, but it worked. "This is insane," muttered a human officer watching a joint training exercise. 3 species with different languages, different tactics, different everything. "Welcome to the future," Park replied. "Get used to insane. It's going to be our normal from now on." The greatest challenge came from outside the Confederation. A species called the Zarnathi, who had never been part of the Concordat, saw the chaos following the Concordat's collapse as an opportunity. They invaded 3 former Concordat worlds, expecting easy conquest. The Confederation response was immediate and unanimous. The joint fleet, including Crithian ships, jumped to defend the attacked worlds. The Zarnathi found themselves facing a coordinated defense from a dozen species using combined human and Crithian military doctrine. The war lasted 3 months. The Confederation won decisively. But more importantly, they demonstrated that their alliance wasn't just words on paper. When member worlds were attacked, the others responded. The Zarnathi surrendered and requested to join the Confederation. After much debate, they were accepted with conditions. They had to pay reparations, accept monitors, and prove over time that they could be trusted. "We're not perfect," Okonkwo told the Zarnathi representative. "We'll make mistakes. We'll argue. Sometimes we'll fail. But we're trying to build something better than what came before. If you want to be part of that, welcome." 8 years after the war, high-security prisoner facility on Titan received an unusual visitor. Ambassador Chow from Earth requested to speak with High Arbiter Zelkoth. Zelkoth had aged during his imprisonment. His purple skin had faded to a dull gray. His movements were slow, but his mind remained sharp. "Ambassador," he greeted Chow. "I wasn't expecting visitors. I wanted to ask you something," Chow said, sitting across from the former High Arbiter. "You've been following the news?" "I have." Zelkoth gestured to the screen in his cell, which showed broadcasts from across the Confederation. "You've built something remarkable. Something I didn't think was possible." "Why didn't you think it was possible?" Zelkoth considered the question carefully. "Because in my experience, power always concentrates. The strong dominate the weak. That's the natural order. The Concordat understood that and built our empire accordingly. And yet here we are," Chow said, "an alliance of equals." "More or less, for now," Zelkoth replied. "Give it time. Someone will seize power. Someone always does," Chow shook his head. "Maybe. But humans learned something important from our own history. We learned that power concentrated in one place always corrupts, always fails. The solution isn't to prevent power from existing. It's to distribute it so widely that no one can dominate everyone else. That's chaos," Zelkoth said. "Yes," Chow agreed. "Productive chaos. Creative chaos. The kind of chaos that lets 100 different solutions bloom and see which ones work best." He leaned forward. "You demanded our surrender because you thought your way was the only way. You were wrong. There are infinite ways to organize a society. We're trying one that respects that diversity. Zelkoth was quiet for a long time. I destroyed your Mars colonies. I killed 3 million of your people. Why are you still trying to convince me you're right? Because, Chow said gently, you're still here. You're still thinking. High Arbiter Zelkoth stared at the tactical display, watching millions of autonomous weapons orbit around his trapped fleet like predators circling wounded prey. Behind them, the human fleet waited with alien patience. They weren't demanding immediate surrender. They were simply waiting, letting the Crithians understand their situation completely. Status of all ships, Zelkoth ordered, his voice hollow. His tactical officer ran the numbers. 147 capital ships operational. Most have damage from the jump emergence. We lost 23 ships in the initial weapons platform strikes. Shields are holding, but power reserves are dropping. If we engage, we can destroy maybe 30% of the weapons platforms before they overwhelm us. And the human fleet? Waiting at optimal firing range. If we move toward them, the weapons platforms will activate. If we try to jump out, they'll hit us during the charging sequence. High Arbiter, we're in a perfect kill box. Zelkoth had studied human military history during the voyage to Earth. He knew they had invented this tactic centuries ago. He just never imagined they could apply it to space warfare on this scale. The patience required, the coordination, the sheer amount of resources devoted to preparing a trap they might never use. Open a channel to the human commander, he said finally. Admiral Park's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes and her uniform was rumpled. But her gaze was steady and her voice was firm. High Arbiter, she said. You have one chance to survive this. Power down all weapons. Disable your faster-than-light drives. Allow boarding parties to secure your ships. You and all personnel will be taken into custody and held for trial. Trial? Zelkoth felt a flash of his old arrogance. By what authority? By the authority of survival, Park replied. You came to our system. You killed 3 million of our people. You declared war. We're finishing it. The only question is whether you die today or live to see tomorrow. Zelkoth closed the channel. He looked around his command center at officers who had never known defeat. Opinions? His second officer spoke carefully. If we fight, we die, all of us. The fleet will be destroyed and the Crithian homeworld will be defenseless. If we surrender, at least some of us survive to rebuild. The Concordat will never recover from this. Zelkoth said quietly. 1,000 years of dominance ended because we underestimated one species. Perhaps, said his intelligence officer, we underestimated what any species can do when they're fighting for survival, rather than conquest. Zelkoth made the hardest decision of his life. All ships, power down weapons. Disable FTL drives. Prepare for boarding. The Crithian fleet went dark. Human marines boarded the ships carefully, expecting traps. But the Crithians were defeated in spirit as well as strategy. They surrendered without resistance. Within 6 hours, 147 capital ships and their crews were in human custody. Secretary General Okonkwo watched the operation from Earth. Total casualties? Ours or theirs? Asked an aide. Both. We lost 48 ships in the final engagement. 6,000 personnel. The Crithians lost 23 ships. Total Crithian deaths across the entire war are around 35,000. Ours are higher, Okonkwo nodded. She knew the number. 112,000 human deaths, including Mars. A small number compared to some of humanity's historical wars, but each one was a person with family, dreams, a life cut short. And the intelligence we gathered from their ships? She asked. Extensive. We have locations of every Concordat world, communication protocols, political structure, and most importantly, we have a list of the 143 species the Concordat conquered. Okonkwo smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Contact them. All of them. Tell them humanity is offering them something the Concordat never did. Freedom. Over the next 6 months, human ships jumped to systems across Concordat space. But they weren't warships coming to conquer. They were envoys carrying a message and an offer. The Tyranni species, conquered 200 years earlier, received human visitors on their homeworld. The Tyranni had once been independent, proud, and technologically advanced. The Concordat had reduced them to providers of raw materials and basic labor. Ambassador James Rodriguez stood before the Tyranni Council with a simple message. We're not here to replace your masters. We're here to help you get rid of them. The Tyranny Council leader was cautious. Why? What do you gain? Allies, Rodriguez said honestly. Friends, trading partners, and the satisfaction of knowing we're doing the right thing. He pulled up a data file. These are Crithian shield frequencies. These are their weapons specifications. These are their military protocols. We're giving this to all of you. Every species the Concordat conquered. What you do with it is your choice. They'll retaliate, the Tyranny leader warned. Rodriguez smiled. Let them try. They learned what happens when they fight humanity. We'll teach them what happens when they fight all of us together. Similar conversations happened on dozens of worlds. Some species were too afraid to rebel, but many others saw their chance. The Vexler, conquered 50 years ago, used human weapons to destroy their Concordat garrison. The Plethani disabled the tribute collectors and reclaimed their resources. The Quroth, an aquatic species forced to give up their oceans, flooded the Concordat facilities and drove out their oppressors. The Concordat tried to respond, but their forces were scattered. The Crithians, the warrior species at the heart of the Alliance, had lost most of their fleet at Earth. The other 6 species looked at the spreading rebellion and made calculations. Was the Concordat worth saving? Was it worth fighting a war on 100 fronts against enemies equipped with human technology? 3 species withdrew from the Concordat entirely. 2 more reduced their commitment to internal defense only. Only 1 species, the Draxini, remained fully loyal to the Crithians. Zelkoth, held in comfortable but secure custody on Earth, watched the collapse through the news feeds humans allowed him. His aide, a young officer named Krelvin, brought him reports each day. The Tyranny have declared independence, Krelvin reported. The Vexler system has expelled all Concordat forces. The Plethani are demanding reparations for 2 centuries of exploitation. How many systems have we lost? Zelkoth asked. 73 and counting. High Arbiter, the Concordat is falling apart. Zelkoth nodded slowly. He had feared this from the moment humanity rejected his ultimatum. The Concordat's power was built on perception. When species believed they couldn't win, they didn't fight. But humanity had shattered that perception. If one species could defeat the Concordat, others could too. What are the humans doing? He asked. Supporting the rebellions, providing weapons, training, intelligence, but they're not conquering. They help liberate systems and then they leave. They're setting up trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, but nothing that looks like the old Concordat structure. Despite himself, Zelkoth was curious. Why not? They have the power. They could build their own empire. Krelvin was quiet for a moment. I asked one of the human guards that question. He said his species had tried empires before and they never ended well. He said humans learned that the only thing harder than winning a war is keeping the peace after. Zelkoth thought about that. Humans learned from mistakes. The Concordat had conquered for 1,000 years and never questioned whether their approach might be flawed. The final collapse came when the Draxani, the last loyal species, were overwhelmed by rebellions in their own territory. They sent a desperate message to the Crithian homeworld requesting aid. But the Crithians had nothing left to send. Their fleet was captured. Their resources were depleted. Their warrior class was dead or imprisoned. Former Concordat subjects, drunk on freedom and furious about centuries of exploitation, began attacking Crithian worlds. Not just military targets, civilian populations. The species that had ruled through fear was now being hunted to extinction. Secretary General Okonkwo received reports of massacres on 3 Crithian colonies. The numbers were terrible. Children dying for their parents' sins. Civilians murdered by mobs seeking revenge. We have to intervene, she told the Security Council. Many council members disagreed. They killed 3 million of us on Mars, Representative Torres argued. Why should we save them? Because, Okonkwo said firmly, if we let this genocide happen, we're no better than they are. We fought for freedom, not revenge. The vote was close, but humanity decided to act. Human fleets jumped to Crithian space, but this time they came as protectors. They positioned themselves between vengeful alien mobs and terrified Crithian civilians. Admiral Park broadcast a message to all approaching forces. These civilians are under human protection. If you want revenge, you'll have to go through us first, and we just proved we can beat anyone in this galaxy. Most of the revenge fleets backed down. A few tried to push through. Park destroyed 3 ships to make her point, then invited the fleet commanders to talk. We understand your anger, she told them. We're angry too. But killing children doesn't bring back your dead. It just creates more death. If you want justice, we'll give you justice. We're setting up tribunals. War crimes trials. The Crithians who gave the orders will face judgment. But we won't allow genocide. Not of them. Not of anyone. The Crithian main fleet consisted of 300 capital ships, twice that many support vessels, and enough firepower to reduce a planet to dust. High Arbiter Zelkoth commanded from his flagship Eternal Dominion, confident that this overwhelming display would finally break humanity's will. They'll see this armada and surrender, he told his council. No species can face this and choose extinction, but Zelkoth didn't understand humanity. He didn't understand that humans had faced extinction before dozens of times throughout their history. Ice ages, supervolcano eruptions, plagues that killed half their population, nuclear weapons pointed at their own cities. Each time they survived by refusing to accept the end. Earth Defense Command tracked the Crithian fleet as it gathered near the Oort cloud. Admiral Park stood in the command center, surrounded by officers from every nation on Earth. The old rivalries were gone now. When facing annihilation, humans had a remarkable ability to remember they were all the same species. They think this is overwhelming force, Park said quietly. They don't know what that phrase means to us. She pulled up a tactical display showing not just military assets, but every resource humanity possessed. Mining ships with improvised railguns, colony transports converted into missile platforms, scientific vessels fitted with experimental weapons, even luxury cruise liners, their passenger decks stripped out and replaced with whatever weapons could be mounted. And deeper in the system, hidden in the asteroid belt on distant moons, buried in the dark side of Mercury, were the weapons humanity had hoped never to use, the ones they had built during their darkest periods of the Cold War, and updated with modern technology. The doomsday devices. If they want overwhelming force, Park said, let's show them what it looks like when humanity stops holding back. The first engagement happened near Saturn. The Crithian vanguard encountered what appeared to be a small human fleet, maybe 40 ships. The Crithians moved to engage, expecting another quick victory. The human ships retreated towards Saturn's rings. The Crithians followed, confident. Then the rings exploded. Humanity had spent 3 months seeding Saturn's rings with autonomous weapons platforms. Thousands of them. Each one no bigger than a refrigerator, designed to be invisible until activated. When the Crithian vanguard entered the rings, they all activated at once. The vanguard was destroyed in minutes. 200 Crithian ships gone. The survivors retreated in shock. What just happened? Demanded Zelkoth. His tactical officer was pale. They turned an entire planetary ring system into a weapons platform. High Arbiter, the resources required, the planning, the coordination. They've been preparing this for months, since before we even arrived. Zelkoth felt a chill. You mean they knew we were coming? No, sir. I mean they've been preparing for someone like us their entire history. The Crithian fleet regrouped and continued forward. They were more cautious now, but they still had overwhelming numbers. They would win through sheer force. Then humanity showed them what sheer force really meant. The Crithians captured Earth's moon, thinking it would be a useful staging ground. They landed 60 ships on the surface and began establishing a base. Admiral Park watched the landing with cold satisfaction. How long? She asked her engineering team. Gravity anchors are in position. Charges are set. We can execute in 10 minutes. Park thought about the moon. Humanity's first step into space. The site of their first lunar landing, preserved as a memorial. She thought about what they were about to do to it. History will judge us, she said quietly. Execute. Deep inside the moon in tunnels humanity had been digging for decades. Massive gravity manipulation devices activated. They had been built for asteroid mining, designed to alter the gravitational field of small bodies. Now they were being used for something else. The moon's structure began to collapse. It didn't explode. Explosions would have scattered debris harmlessly. Instead, the moon imploded, its mass condensing into a smaller, denser form. And it fell. 60 Crithian ships tried to escape. 20 made it. The rest were crushed as the moon collapsed on top of them, its increased gravity pulling them down, the debris field tearing them apart. Zelkoth watched in horror as humanity destroyed their own moon just to take out 60 ships. They're insane, he whispered. His intelligence officer had a different assessment. No, High Arbiter. They're desperate, and they're not fighting to win. They're fighting to make sure that if they die, we die with them. The concept was alien to Zelkoth. The Concordat fought to conquer. They fought to expand. They never fought mutual annihilation wars because there was no profit in them. But humanity had invented the concept of mutually assured destruction. They had lived with nuclear weapons pointed at their own cities for centuries. They understood that sometimes the only way to prevent war was to make war so terrible that no one could win. Now they were teaching that lesson to the galaxy. The Crithian fleet pressed forward. They were still winning by the numbers. They just had to reach Earth, demonstrate their power one more time, and humanity would surely surrender. They established a safe base in an asteroid field, far from any human presence. They fortified it with shields, weapons, and early warning systems. Nothing could approach without being detected. 3 days later, a comet hit the base at 40% the speed of light. There was no warning. One moment the base existed. The next, there was only plasma and radiation. 200 more Crithian ships gone. Zelkoth demanded answers. Where did the comet come from? How did they aim it? How did they accelerate it to relativistic speed? His scientists worked frantically. Finally, they found the answer. Humanity had been attaching engines to comets for weeks, slowly altering their orbits. Hundreds of comets, all now on paths that could intersect with any point in the solar system. And humanity had the patience to wait weeks for their weapons to arrive. This is how they wage war, the chief scientist reported. They think in terms of campaigns lasting years. They prepare weapons that won't be used for months. They sacrifice their own people and infrastructure to achieve strategic goals. High Arbiter, I don't think they can be defeated by conventional military force. Zelkoth wanted to argue, but the evidence was undeniable. Every Crithian victory cost them more than it should. Every human defeat led to some new tactic, some new horror. The humans were pulling out weapons and strategies from their entire bloody history, thousands of years of warfare, and applying all of it simultaneously. He tried a different approach. Propaganda, the Concordat broadcast to Earth, offering generous terms. Surrender now, keep your government, pay only 10% tribute instead of 30%. Peace with honor. Admiral Chen responded with a broadcast of his own. You killed 3 million people on Mars to frighten us. Let me tell you something about humans. We spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. Not 1,000 years like you. 10,000. We've tried every form of warfare you can imagine and dozens you can't. We've burned our own cities to deny them to enemies. We've poisoned our own wells. We've died by the millions rather than surrender. He paused, letting that sink in. You came here thinking we were primitive, divided, weak. You were wrong. Our divisions made us strong because each group developed their own solutions to the same problems. Our conflicts made us strong because we learned from every defeat. And our primitiveness made us strong because we never forgot what it takes to survive when everything is trying to kill you. Chen's face hardened. You've just given 300 nations, 10,000 corporations, and 40 billion people a common enemy. Do you know what we were training for during all those wars? This you. We spent millennia preparing to fight aliens. We just didn't know it yet. The broadcast ended with a simple statement. We will make you regret you ever found us. The words spread through the Crithian fleet like poison. Morale began to crack. The other 6 Concordat species watched the war with growing alarm. This wasn't how conquests worked. This wasn't how warfare was supposed to be. 3 of the allied species quietly contacted Zelkoth and said they would be withdrawing their ships from the fleet. This has gone too far, they said. We joined the Concordat for mutual benefit, not mutual destruction. Zelkoth tried to keep them committed. We're still winning. Look at the numbers. Numbers don't matter, one of the allies replied. When the enemy is willing to die to the last person and take you with them, we can't afford this war. Neither can you. But Zelkoth couldn't stop now. If he withdrew, if he admitted defeat, the Concordat would collapse. 1,000 years of dominance ended by one stubborn species that refused to follow the rules. He decided on one final gambit. A decapitation strike. Bypass all the defenses, all the tricks, all the traps. Jump the entire remaining Crithian fleet directly to Earth orbit and glass the planet. Humanity couldn't win if their homeworld was destroyed. They'll fight with other colonies, warned his tactical officer. They'll surrender, Zelkoth insisted. Once Earth burns, once they see their homeworld die, they'll finally break. They have to. He prepared the fleet for the jump. The coordinates were carefully calculated. They would emerge right on top of Earth, weapons ready, and begin bombardment immediately. All ships report ready, his communication officer announced. Zelkoth took a breath. Execute jump. The 72 hours passed slowly. High Arbiter Zelkoth spent most of it reviewing reports from previous conquests, confident that Earth would follow the pattern. His staff monitored human communications, noting the heated debates, the protests, the fear. All normal reactions, all leading to the same conclusion. When the deadline arrived, Secretary General Okonkwo appeared on every screen in the solar system. Zelkoth leaned forward in his command chair, ready to hear Earth surrender. High Arbiter Zelkoth, Okonkwo began. Her voice was steady. We have discussed your offer carefully. We have consulted with our people. We have considered every aspect of your terms. She paused. Our answer is no. Zelkoth blinked. He must have misheard. Clarify, he commanded his translator. No, Okonkwo repeated. We reject your terms completely. Humanity will remain free. If you wish to trade with us as equals, we welcome that. If you wish to share knowledge as friends, we are open to it. But we will never surrender our freedom. Not in 72 hours, not ever. The communication ended. For a moment, Zelkoth sat in stunned silence. Then anger replaced surprise. They dared refuse? These primitives who could barely reach their own moon a century ago? Execute Pacification Protocol 7, he ordered. Destroy their Mars colonies. Full bombardment. Leave nothing intact. His weapons officer hesitated. High Arbiter, that's 3 million inhabitants. Which is why it will be effective, Zelkoth replied coldly. They need to understand the cost of defiance. The Crithian ships moved into position. Their weapons charged, drawing power from reactors that could fuel small stars. On Mars, alarms screamed across every dome and tunnel. Governor Richards stood in the central command center watching the Crithian ships approach. Evacuation? Asked his aide. Richards shook his head. Where would they go? We have 3 hours at most. He opened a channel to every settlement on Mars. This is Governor Richards. I won't lie to you. The Crithians are coming. Those who wish to spend their last hours with family should go now. Those who wish to fight, we have some tools. Mars had no military, but it had mining charges, industrial lasers, and 300 years of human stubbornness. As families huddled in the deepest shelters, volunteers gathered weapons meant for rock and turned them toward the sky. The Crithian bombardment began at dawn. Energy beams tore through domes like paper. Explosions ripped across the red surface. Within 20 minutes, the Mars colonies were gone. 3 million people who had wanted nothing but to build new lives in a new world. Zelkoth watched the destruction with satisfaction. Now Earth would understand. Now they would surrender. But Earth's response was not surrender. It was silence. For 48 hours, humanity said nothing. No pleas for mercy. No negotiations. No communication at all. Human ships retreated from Crithian sensors. Stations went dark. It was as if the entire species had simply vanished. Zelkoth found the silence more disturbing than any threat. Where are they? He demanded. Show me their fleet positions. His tactical officer looked confused. High Arbiter, we can't locate them. They've withdrawn from all known positions. Long-range scans show nothing. Then scan harder, Zelkoth snapped. They can't hide an entire civilization. But humanity had learned something the Concordat never had. They had learned it from countless wars against themselves. When facing a superior force, you don't stand and fight. You disappear. You make the enemy uncertain. You attack where they're weak and vanish before they can respond. The first sign that something was wrong came from the Crithian outpost in the Barnard star system. The outpost had 50 personnel and served as an early warning station. At 0300 hours ship time, the outpost simply stopped transmitting. Zelkoth sent a ship to investigate. It found debris. Just debris. The outpost, its garrison, everything was gone. Scans showed evidence of weapons fire, but the signatures made no sense. They weren't Crithian. They weren't anything in the Concordat database. 6 hours later, another outpost went silent. This one was in the Wolf 359 system. Then another at Ross 154. Each time, investigation teams found only wreckage. No survivors. No witnesses. And those strange weapon signatures that shouldn't exist. How are they doing this? Zelkoth demanded at an emergency command meeting. Their ships can't travel this fast. Their weapons can't penetrate our shields. This is impossible. His intelligence officer pulled up new data. High Arbiter. We're detecting human vessels in systems they shouldn't be able to reach. The energy signatures are unusual. They appear to be using a form of faster-than-light drive we haven't seen before. They've had FTL for barely a century, Zelkoth protested. Basic jump drives. Nothing sophisticated. These aren't military vessels, sir. The intelligence officer highlighted several contacts. That's a mining ship. That's a colony transport. That's a civilian yacht. They're all heavily modified with weapons we don't recognize. Zelkoth stared at the data. He finally understood what concordant intelligence had missed. Humanity wasn't unified like other species. Each human nation, each corporation, each colony had been developing technology independently. While the Concordat had watched Earth Defense Fleet's official vessels, thousands of private entities had been building their own ships, testing their own engines, creating their own weapons. And now they were sharing everything. The attacks continued. Human ships appeared from nowhere, struck fast and vanished. They didn't fight fair. They didn't follow any rules of engagement. A Crethian supply convoy found itself in the middle of a minefield that hadn't been there 10 minutes earlier. A patrol ship was rammed by a human freighter traveling at relativistic speed. A garrison was poisoned when humans hacked their life support systems. They're fighting like criminals, complained Zelkoth's second officer. These tactics are dishonorable. Admiral Sarah Park would have laughed at that if she'd heard it. She stood on the bridge of the commandeered cargo hauler Defiance looking at the tactical display. Beside her, engineers from 12 different nations worked at jury-rigged control stations. Their weapons were a mix of military prototypes, industrial tools, and devices that violated physics as the Concordat understood it. Dishonorable, Park muttered. They slaughtered 3 million civilians and they talk about honor. She turned to her crew. Target the supply depot at Proxima Centauri. Hit them and jump out before they can respond. Admiral, said her tactical officer, we're getting messages from other ships. They want to coordinate. Park pulled up the communication network. Hundreds of human vessels filled the display. Military ships, yes, but also converted cargo haulers, mining vessels, even luxury yachts stripped down and armed. Each one was commanded by volunteers. Each one was ready to die, and each one had its own ideas about how to hurt the enemy. Tell them, Park said, that there's no central command. Every captain picks their own target. Move fast, hit hard, don't get caught, and remember what they did to Mars. The messages spread across the human fleet. Along with them spread something else, a phrase that started as gallows humor but became a battle cry. They wanted a war crime. We'll show them what the species that invented the concept can do. The Crithians didn't understand it. They had fought wars before. They knew violence. But human warfare was different. Humans had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. They had tried every possible tactic, every strategy, every form of destruction. They had written books about it. They had made it into art, and now they turned all that accumulated knowledge against a common enemy. A Crithian commander reported to Zelkoth. They're using nuclear weapons in space combat. That's insane. The radiation affects both sides. Another commander. They collapsed a space station on top of our fleet. Their own station. They killed their own people just to take out our ships. And another. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. It's just humans laughing. Laughing as they die. Zelkoth realized that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat. Every loss made them more creative. Every setback taught them new lessons. They adapted faster than any species he had ever seen. On Earth, Secretary General Okonkwo met with what remained of the military command. Status? We're losing, Admiral Park reported bluntly via secure channel. We're losing ships, people, resources. But so are they. And they're not used to losing anything. How long can we keep this up? As long as we have to. Park pulled up casualty figures. The numbers were terrible, but then she pulled up Crithian losses. They're scared, ma'am. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Concordat is scared. That's worth something. Okonkwo thought about Mars, about the millions dead, about the thousands dying every day in this impossible war. Is it worth enough? Park was quiet for a moment. Ask me when it's over. If we're still alive to ask. In Crithian command, Zelkoth called for his strategic council. We need to end this quickly. Commit the main fleet. Overwhelming force. Show them they can't win. One of his advisors, a cautious older officer, raised a concern. High Arbiter, our allies in the Concordat are asking questions. They want to know why this is taking so long. They want to know if this conflict is worth the cost. It's one primitive world, Zelkoth snapped. It was one primitive world, the advisor corrected. Now it's a species that has destroyed 42 of our outposts. The Crethian warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. There were 50 of them, each one 3 kilometers long, their hulls gleaming with the dark purple metal that had brought terror to 100 worlds. High Arbiter Zelk watched the primitive human homeworld through his command screen. The blue and green planet spun peacefully, unaware that its freedom was about to end. Zelkoth had done this 143 times before. The process was always the same. Arrive with overwhelming force. Show the primitives what real power looked like. Give them a simple choice, surrender or die. Every species chose surrender. Some took a few days to decide. Some took a few hours, but they all knelt in the end. Humans would be no different. The Concordat had studied Earth for 30 years. They knew everything about these creatures. Humans were violent, yes, but they were violent with each other. They fought over land, resources, ideas, even invisible lines they drew on maps. The United Earth Assembly was barely 50 years old, and it struggled to keep the peace even now. Half the human nations didn't trust the other half. Their military forces were scattered across dozens of commands. Their technology was adequate but nothing special. They were perfect targets. Send the message, Zelkoth commanded. Standard ultimatum package. Translation in all major human languages. His communication officer nodded. The message beam shot toward Earth at light speed. It would reach them in 8 minutes. Zelkoth had written the speech himself, using the same template that had worked for over a millennium. Show respect for their courage. Acknowledge their potential. Explain how much better their lives would be under Concordat guidance. Then make the terms crystal clear. On Earth, alarms went off in every defense station. The United Earth Assembly went into emergency session. Scientists and military officers crowded into command centers. For the first time in human history, every screen on the planet showed the same image. The face of High Arbiter Zelkoth. People of Earth, the alien began. His voice was translated into flawless Mandarin, English, Spanish, Arabic, and 50 other languages. I am High Arbiter Zelkoth of the Crethian Concordat. We represent 7 ancient species who have brought order to the galaxy for 1,000 years. We have watched your world. We have seen your potential. We have also seen your chaos. In the United Earth Assembly chamber in Geneva, 300 representatives sat in absolute silence. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo gripped the armrests of her chair. Her face showed nothing, but her knuckles were white. You fight among yourselves, Zelkoth continued. You waste resources on conflicts that benefit no one. You suffer because you lack guidance. The Concordat offers you a place in galactic civilization. We will end your wars. We will provide technology far beyond your current capabilities. We will protect you from dangers you cannot yet imagine. President Chen of the Asian Union leaned toward his aide. Get to the point, he whispered. As if he heard, Zelkoth's tone changed. In return, you will accept Concordat governance. Your military forces will be dissolved. 30% of Earth's resources will be provided as tribute. All major decisions regarding your species will require Concordat approval. These terms are non-negotiable. The chamber erupted in shouting. Representatives jumped to their feet. Security officers moved to restore order, but even they looked shaken. Zelkoth waited for the noise to fade. You have 72 hours to deliver your answer. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. Consider carefully. 143 civilizations have accepted these terms. All of them now live in peace and prosperity under our guidance. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. For 30 seconds, no one in the assembly chamber spoke. Then everyone spoke at once. Secretary General Okonkwo hit the gavel 3 times. Order! We need order! She looked at Defense Minister Kowalski. Assessment. Kowalski stood, his face grim. Preliminary scans show weapons we can't match. Their shields would take days to penetrate with everything we have. One of those ships could destroy a city. 50 of them could destroy Earth. So we have no choice, said Representative Torres from South America. We always have a choice, snapped President Chen. The question is whether we can live with the consequences. What consequences? Representative Abadi from the Middle Eastern Coalition stood. They're offering peace, technology, protection, maybe. Maybe this is good for humanity. Good? Admiral Sarah Park of Earth Defense Fleet rose from her observer seat. They want to own us. 30% of everything we produce? No military? No self-determination? That's not peace. That's slavery with better technology. The argument raged for hours. Some representatives argued for immediate surrender. Why fight when defeat was certain? Some argued for negotiation. Perhaps the terms could be improved. Others argued for defiance, though they had no answer when asked how Earth could possibly win. Secretary General Okonkwo finally called for silence. We need more information. Admiral Park, recall all deep space assets? I want every ship, every station, every resource we have accounted for. Dr. Yamamoto, gather every physicist and engineer we have. If there's a weakness in their technology, find it. Ambassador Rodriguez, start reaching out to our colonies. They need to know what's happening. And our answer? Asked Representative Torres. What do we tell them in 72 hours? Okonkwo looked around the chamber. She saw fear in many faces, but she also saw anger, determination, the same stubbornness that had carried humanity from caves to the stars. We tell them the truth, she said quietly, whatever that truth is. Across Earth, the debate consumed everything. News networks ran constant coverage. Social media exploded with opinions. Peace protests formed in some cities. In others, people demanded resistance. Ancient enemies found themselves on the same side. Old allies discovered they disagreed. In the Mars colonies, Governor Richards watched the Crithian ships on his monitor. Mars had 3 million people now. Children who had never seen Earth, families building new lives. He thought about the Concordat's promise of protection and prosperity. He thought about the cost of that promise. He sent a message to Earth. Mars stands with you. Whatever you decide. On the lunar bases, in the asteroid mining stations, in the distant outpost near Jupiter's moons, the same message repeated. The colonies would follow Earth's lead. But in military installations, something else was happening. Officers were pulling classified files. Engineers were running calculations. Scientists were testing theories they had never had reason to test before. Weapons designers were dusting off proposals that had been considered too expensive, too dangerous, too extreme. Admiral Park stood in Earth Defense Command, looking at a wall screen showing the Crithian fleet. An aide approached her nervously. Admiral, we're getting requests from Research Division. They want to know if Project Ragnarok is active. Park remembered Project Ragnarok, the Doomsday Protocols, the weapons that violated 3 different treaties, the plans they made for threats they hoped would never come. Tell them, Park said slowly, that everything is on the table now. In orbit above Earth, construction crews looked at the Crithian ships through telescopes. One crew chief, a woman named Martinez, who had built stations for 20 years, sent a message to her supervisor. How fast can we retrofit a cargo hauler with weapons? The supervisor wrote back, why? Martinez replied, because if we're going to die, I want to die doing something that matters. As the first day ended, Secretary General Okonkwo called an executive session. Only the heads of each major block attended. They talked for 6 hours behind closed doors. When they emerged, Okonkwo's face was set like stone. Prepare a response, she told her communication staff. We'll deliver it in 72 hours as requested. What should we prepare? Asked her chief of staff. Okonkwo looked at the Crithian ships on the wall screen. She thought about every human who had ever refused to kneel, every slave who chose death over chains, every soldier who held the line when retreat made sense, every ordinary person who said no when the world demanded yes. Prepare, she said, for everything.